Good evening. See if I can do any better with this than you did, Kevin. We've had, okay. How's come the slide's not advancing? Because I haven't pressed a button yet. I knew that. We have had, technology's a funny thing. We've all had some issues with it, and there have been a few times at Roseville, but I know Wayne, especially when he's singing, he'd press the button once and it'd just flip through a whole bunch of slides. It was wonderful. He had to be there. Tonight we're going to talk about Nadab and Abihu, and I like to look at passages like this. Typically on Sunday evenings, I like to look at some Old Testament things and really relate to us today. This is what I would classify as one of the more troubling passages of the Bible because their punishment was so harsh and so quick, and so I want to look at that and see maybe what happened. And particular, Paul writes in Romans 15 and says that these things were written for us, for our learning and for our edification. And so we're going to learn from it. One of the things that I want us to learn, and probably the main thing, Wayne just read it to us, and we're going to finish up with this passage tonight out of 1 Peter 1:16. Be holy because God is holy. I got a text from a friend of mine today out in Ohio, and he got a text from a friend of his. He says, I didn't know how to answer this, but she at work, she got a raise and found out everybody got a raise and found out somebody who's been working there for 3 months and she's been there for 4 years, they're making the same thing. And so she was upset. And she wanted to know if she should be upset. And I thought he handled it pretty well. One of the things he did was went to Matthew chapter 20, and where Jesus hires workers at the beginning of the day, and they're out there all day long, and during the different times during the day, he hires more people, and finally the ones come at the end of the day, they work for 1 hour, and they go up and stand in line to get their paycheck, and they get what he promised the people that were there all day got. They're back there thinking, oh man, bonus time for us, this is going to be great. And they were upset because they got the same thing everybody else got. And he told her about that passage, and then told her she probably ought to quit. Well, let's open the Bibles and take a look at a few passages tonight. Leviticus chapter 10 is the one that tells us about Nadab and Abihu and their demise. But I want to look at the very end of Leviticus chapter 9 first. And this may have a little bit of an explanation as to what they thought or what they expected or what maybe God expected them to wait on. Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. What did the glory of the Lord look like? This is Sunday night. We're allowed to talk back and forth. It was a cloud. It was a cloud. Fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat portions on the altar. And when all the people saw it, they shouted for joy and fell face down. We will go on into chapter 10. No, we won't yet. We're going to look at a couple other things. Nadab and Abihu were the two oldest sons of Aaron. What were the names of the other two sons? Eleazar and Ithamar. And we're going to read about them too, because they, in chapter 10, this is something for you just to look for when we get there, but in Leviticus chapter 10, Nadab and Abihu are killed because they disobeyed God. Later in the chapter, Eleazar and Ithamar disobeyed God and were not killed. And a whole lot of people disobeyed God in the Bible and were not instantly killed. Some were. So our other lesson is, don't disobey God. Exodus chapter 24. Moses made several trips up and down Mount Sinai. I think if you count them all up, and it can get a little bit confusing, but I think if you count all of them up, he made 8 trips up and down Mount Sinai. And this is one of those trips, and there are some other confusing things. And I'm just putting these out there in case you want to study the Word a little bit more, but I think it's in John chapter 1, isn't it, where John writes, it says, no one has ever seen God. And Moses wasn't allowed to really look at the full glory of God, was he? But here we see that Moses, Nadab and Abihu, and Aaron, and 70 of the elders not only see God, but they eat a meal with him, a fellowship meal. Then the Lord said to Moses, come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel. So we're looking at this and seeing that Nadab and Abihu have a very prominent position. But Moses alone is to approach the Lord. The others must not come near, and the people may not come up with him. When Moses went and told the people all the Lord's words and laws, they responded with one voice. And I'm kind of thinking, since they all heard it, they all responded with one voice, that probably would include Nadab and Abihu, wouldn't it? And here's what they said: everything the Lord has said, we will do. Moses then wrote down everything the Lord had said. He got up early the next morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Then he sent young Israelite men, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as fellowship offerings to the Lord. Moses took half of the blood and put it in bowls, and the other half he splashed against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it to the people. They responded, we will do everything the Lord has said. We will obey. Did that last very long? No, it didn't. Were they all killed immediately? No, they weren't. Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel went up and saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of lapis lazuli. I had to look that one up one time. It's sapphire. As bright blue as the sky. But God did not raise his hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate and drank. And eating and drinking was a different thing back then. It was a fellowship meal. Sometimes I eat breakfast with some guys, and it's a fellowship meal. It lasts at least 2 hours. Of course, when it takes an hour and a half to get them to come and recognize you're there and you get coffee, it's part of the explanation. Nadab and Abihu are prominent. They saw God. They ate a fellowship meal with God. They said, everything the Lord has said, we will do. And that's got to be part of it. Leviticus chapter 10. Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, took their censers, put fire in them, and added incense. And they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, contrary to his command. And there's always a big question. What's unauthorized fire? And I know that. I happen to have the answer to that. It's fire that's not authorized. Who knows what it is? People typically, if there's something they don't think we ought to be doing, that's unauthorized fire before the Lord. Well, yes, Bill?
Didn't they have a specific formula that they were supposed to use? And it was only supposed to be used as incense, not for anything else.
Well, and that's true, and we're going to read about that too. Not necessarily a formula for it, but there was only a specific kind of incense that they were supposed to do, forbidden on this altar to use anything else. So fire came out from the presence of the Lord. That sounds a whole lot like the end of chapter 9, doesn't it? And consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Moses then said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord spoke of when he said, 'Among those who approach me, I will be proved holy. In the sight of all the people, I will be honored.'" And that's the problem. Aaron remained silent. Moses summoned Mishael and Elzaphan, sons of Aaron's uncle Uziel, and said to them, "Come here, carry your cousins outside the camp, away from the front of the sanctuary." So they came in and carried them, still in their tunics, outside the camp as Moses ordered. Why do you suppose Aaron and Eleazar and Abiathar didn't carry him out? That would make them unclean, and they were serving at the temple. Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, "Do not let your hair become unkempt, and do not tear your clothes, or you will die, and the Lord will be angry with the whole community. But your relatives, all the Israelites, may mourn for those the Lord has destroyed by fire. Do not leave the entrance to the tent of meeting, or you will die, because the Lord's anointing oil is on you." So they did as Moses said. Now, doesn't that sound like an awful thing? Your sons die, or for the others, your brothers die, and don't you mourn for them. Then the Lord said to Aaron, "You and your sons are not to drink wine or other fermented drink whenever you go into the tent of meeting, or you will die. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come, so that you can distinguish between the holy and the common, between the unclean and the clean, and so you could teach the Israelites all the decrees the Lord has given them through Moses." This is a little farther down on the slideshow, but this really indicates to me at least that Nadab and Abihu were probably drunk when they went in to serve God. And that would be treating God unholy. Moses said to Aaron and his remaining sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, "Take the grain offering left over from the food offerings prepared without yeast and presented to the Lord, and eat it beside the altar, for it is most holy. Eat it in the sanctuary area, because it is your share and your son's share of the food offerings presented to the Lord, for so I have been commanded. But you and your sons and your daughters may eat the breast that was waved and the thigh that was presented. Eat them in a ceremonially clean place. They have been given to you and your children as your share of the Israelites' fellowship offerings. The thigh that was presented and the breast that was waved must be brought with the fat portions of the food offerings to be waved before the Lord as a wave offering. This will be the perpetual share for you and your children, as the Lord has commanded." When Moses inquired about the goat of the sin offering, and found that it had been burned up, he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining sons, and asked, "Why didn't you eat the sin offering in the sanctuary area? It is most holy. It was given to you to take away the guilt of the community by making atonement for them before the Lord. Since its blood was not taken into the holy place, you should have eaten the goat in the sanctuary area as I commanded." And so they disobeyed God, just like their brothers had done. Aaron replied to Moses, "Today they sacrificed their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord. But such things as this have happened to me. Would the Lord have been pleased if I had eaten the sin offering today?" When Moses heard this, he was satisfied. And so in this text, in this chapter, we see first of all the judgment of God that appears to me, I assume to most of us, very harsh. And then we get down farther in the chapter, we see the grace of God. And I think the way I read that, did you ever have a time when you were just so upset or depressed or despondent that you just couldn't eat? And I think that's what he's saying. My two oldest sons just died. And we're not allowed to mourn for them. And now you want us to go on just like nothing happened. I can't do it. And Moses said, okay. Exodus chapter 30. And verses 7 through 9. And this is what Bill was talking about earlier. Aaron must burn fragrant incense on the altar every morning when he tends the lamps. He must burn incense again when he lights the lamps at twilight, so incense will burn regularly before the Lord for the generations to come. And this is what they did every morning and every night. They had to go in and light the lamps, and they had to burn this fragrant incense. Do not offer on this altar any other incense or any burnt offering or grain offering, and do not pour a drink offering on it. Once a year, Aaron shall make atonement on its horns. And so it's not like they didn't know the right thing to do. And again, I don't know exactly what they did. I think there are some reasons for that. I think if we do exactly what they did, we'd make sure we didn't exactly do that. And I think what they exactly didn't do was treat God like he's holy. And I think that's what we better do. Why weren't Eleazar and Ithamar killed for disobeying and not eating the offering? Must have been a little bit more to Nadab and Abihu, wasn't there? Luke chapter 12. This may or may not apply. When I think through some things like this, I just kind of jot down some notes, and this is one of those. Luke 12:47 says, "But the one who does not know and does things deserving punishment will be beaten with few blows. From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much more will be asked." They were not only prominent, they were the next Aaron, they were the most prominent priests in Israel, and a lot was expected from them. Some suggestions. First one I think of is I think they were drunk. I thought they were plastered when they went in to serve God and did not treat him like he was holy. And that's why Aaron is given this admonition. Don't you drink any wine or fermented drink when you go into the most holy place. If you do, you're going to die. was early in the nation of Israel. They're just now receiving the Ten Commandments, the law. There were three things that Moses got on Mount Sinai: the law, the Ten Commandments, and the plans for the tabernacle. And so all of this is just starting now, and you don't want to get off on the wrong foot. And I think that's real similar to Ananias and Sapphira. We're going to read about them in Acts chapter 5. Now a man named Ananias, together with his wife Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. With his wife's full knowledge, he kept back part of the money for himself, but brought the rest and put it at the apostles' feet. And that was okay. He could have done that and said, here's a donation I want to make. We're keeping part of the money for ourselves. Peter even tells him that. But he doesn't do that. He's going to look like he's just the best guy there ever was. Here's every cent we got out of our property. It's yours. And Peter said, Ananias, and this is key, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you've lied to the Holy Spirit and have kept for yourself some of the money you received for the land? I think sometimes we get the idea that Nadab and Abihu were just a couple of good old boys in there trying to serve God, and they just slipped up and didn't do the right thing, and God killed them. And that's not the case. And I think we might look the same thing at Ananias and Sapphira and say, well, I kind of did something like that one time with my brother. I'm still living. Why has Satan so filled your heart? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? What made you think of doing such a thing? You've not lied to just human beings, but to God. When Ananias heard this, he fell down and died, and great fear seized all who heard what had happened. Then some young men came forward, wrapped up his body, and carried him out and buried him. About 3 hours later, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter asked her, tell me, is this the price you and Ananias got for the land? Yes, she said, that's the price. Peter said to her, how could you conspire to test the Spirit of the Lord? Listen, the feet of the men who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out also. At that moment she fell down at his feet and died. Then the young men came in, and finding her dead, carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Great fear seized the whole church and all who heard about these events. So I see kind of a similarity here, beginning of the nation of Israel. It's important for them to revere God. Early in the church, all the Christians are still in Jerusalem, and it's real important for them to treat God like he's holy. In both cases, with Ananias and Sapphira and Nadab and Abihu, they didn't. And sometimes we look at things like this and say, well, God made an example out of them. Well, it got everybody's attention. Whether that was part of it or not, I don't know. Years ago, one of my relatives, and that's all I'm going to say about it because this isn't a good story. One of my relatives got in some really big trouble and had to do some hard time. And there were a couple of people there at the church that went in and very supportive of him the whole time. And they heard the judge one time say, this has got to stop, and I'm going to make an example out of him. And of course, they weren't happy about that. And my relative certainly wasn't happy about it. But the judge gave him everything that she could. Don't know if that's the case, but it's a possibility. In both cases, we know this: God was treated as unholy, and that's not going to go unpunished. It is important for us. It's vital for us to understand that God always does everything right. And if God punishes somebody, it was the right thing to do. And God knows their hearts. Ananias and Sapphira weren't people that came in and just thought at the last minute, this would kind of make us look better. And they conspired. Satan had loaded their hearts. They didn't have room for God or thoughts for God, and didn't treat God like he was holy, and tried to show that they were. It's important for us to know that God always does the right thing, whatever it is. If we don't think he is, that's our problem, not his. Again, it was early in Israel and in the church history, and statements needed to be made. And we need to know. We can't just slough over this and say, well, it happened back then, it was a long time ago, and the same passage that says no one's ever seen God says that the law came by Moses, but grace came by Jesus Christ. And so we live different. Paul says, don't you dare try to take advantage of God's grace. We take what God says seriously. Leviticus 16, I want to read just the first couple of verses there. And it was a little more than them just, carelessness, but I think they were at least that also. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron who died when they approached the Lord. And you notice here the important thing isn't after they did the wrong thing in the tabernacle or after they offered unauthorized fire. It's after they approached the Lord as though he were common and not holy. The Lord said to Moses, tell your brother Aaron that he is not to come whenever he chooses into the most holy place, behind the curtain, in front of the atonement cover on the ark, or else he will die. For I appear in the cloud over the atonement cover. And so Aaron gets the same kind of a warning. Don't think that you set the rules or the schedule or the timetable. It's not up to you to approach me. And I am thankful that in Jesus Christ, what he did, it even talks about the most holy place behind the curtain in this text. And I am so thankful that when Jesus was crucified, the curtain in the temple was torn from top to bottom, from God to man. And Hebrews 10 tells us that he opened the way through his body, which is the curtain. And so we have access to the holy God. It's bad enough just to enter in the presence of God or approach God as though he were just some buddy on the street. But if they were drunk, how much worse is it? Second Samuel chapter 6. This is kind of a similar thing. How many of you ever heard of a man by the name of Uzzah? Well, yeah, you went to school with him, but the rest of us read about him in the Bible. David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000, and he and all his men went to Baalah and Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Nadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, and that's not to be confused with Ohio, where I'm from. This is a bad person. That's a pretty good state. Sons of Abinadab were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. Then David became angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. And to this day, that place is called Perez Uzzah. Why the rapid action here? Well, this apparently was a good old boy, and he sees the Ark of the Covenant starting to fall. Well, I'm not going to let that happen. He reaches out to steady it. Boom, he's dead. Well, first of all, were they supposed to carry the Ark of the Covenant on a cart? It was a new cart. No, the Ark of the Covenant, it's not a huge box, but it had rings on it, and they were supposed to put holes through the rings, and the priests were supposed to carry the ark. So they made a big mistake, and Abinadab was Uzzah's father. The Ark of the Covenant had been at his house. You know how long it had been at his house? 20 years. 20 years. That's why David went to get it. And everybody's excited and they're celebrating and music and dancing. And then Uzzah gets killed. That stops the whole procession. David's angry with God because he killed Uzzah, his friend. Uzzah, I'm kind of thinking, living with the Ark of the Covenant for 20 years, he ought to know something about it. Probably a lot. And he knew better than to do what he did. He treated God like he was common. To put the Ark of the Covenant on a cart. When David came back to get the ark, they did it a little different. The priest carried it. They put the poles through the rings, and the priest carried it, and they walked 6 steps. And they stopped, and they sacrificed to God. They treated him like he was holy. They learned. This is our conclusion. This is the primary thing that we learn from Nadab and Abihu and Ananias and Sapphira and Uzzah and a few others. But these are some that it was just immediate and judgment from God, who knows the hearts of all of us. But just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, be holy because I am holy. We are made holy by the blood of Jesus Christ. We are set apart, we're sanctified, we're consecrated. All those big church words mean that we're set apart because we belong to God, and we need to act like we belong to God. We like to extend an invitation. The Word of God needs to make a difference in people's lives. And we're going to do that tonight, do that now. If you have some need here for the church or anything we could do for you, if you maybe haven't been baptized into Christ or you just want to know some more about the Lord or about salvation, or maybe haven't really treated God like He's holy, if there's any way we can assist you in your obedience to Him tonight, we invite you to come forward now while we stand and sing.